Hello and welcome to my next attempt at setting up a descriptive video to show how to link MOD Dwarf to TouchOSC. I've set up a basic pedal board here. You can see on the MOD GUI it's just a delay, distortion and gain. I'm using a Windows laptop which is connected to the Dwarf using the USB connector, which is set to be used for Net plus MIDI in brackets Windows under the Dwarf settings. TouchOSC lets you create control boards which can send out OSC and or MIDI, and with the Dwarf, MIDI controls will be used. Okay, if we move in here, the first thing that needs to be done on a Windows setup is to enable the TouchOSC bridge. And once that's running, you get a little B down in the bottom right hand corner, and if we click on that, enable USB connections is set. If we then open up TouchOSC, make that full screen. If we go to the connections connector, which is the two little chain links in the corner there, if we start on bridge, select connection 1, browse, go to the name of the computer you're on and use the IP address with the 51 in it. That is what the MOD Dwarf uses. And we go to MIDI, make sure connection 1 is selected and browse to Dwarf USB MIDI. We'll put the receive port in, although that isn't used at present. When we've done that, we should be fully connected. Now, what I like to do, you can see here the TouchOSC area which is used. I like to make the size of it 780 pixels by 480 pixels. This is more or less the resolution of a laptop screen, and it's not overly large. The smaller you make it, the clearer the screen is on growth. If we click the arrow there, you can see everything is blank. The little dot in the corner, top right hand corner, closes that, puts us back to the editor. If I now right click on that, I will put in a pager. A pager is something that allows you to have different pages for different objects, and I will have one page for the delay and one for the distortion. I won't have one for the gain. I'll control that from the pedal for safety reasons. I'll talk about that later. First thing I do with the pager, you can see here under control, set X to 0 and Y to 0, and then make the size the same as the screen, so 780 by 480. This means that it fits nicely onto a landscape screen, and if we press the arrow, you can see how it'll appear. Come out of that, back to the editor. We don't need 3 screens. If we scroll down to where it says pages, there's a little X next to number 3. If I press that, OK to delete the page. We're down to 2 pages. Now let's put this to fit, and it gives us a bit more room to do our work. The first thing I'll do, if I open up the 2 page numbers, give them the right names. The first one will be called the tap resistor, reflector. And as we put that name in, it appears here. And the second one will be Buzzface FM. And if we go up to the Use button, that's how it comes up. Nothing on them yet, of course, as we haven't put anything in. Okay. I will now go in and edit a basic pedal for the delay. So if I right click on the screen below tap reflector and go to edit container, That brings out a dotted background. That is where I can put things. If I right click on it, do fader, put one there. If I copy and paste, I can drag that one across to the other side. If I copy, paste again, third one will sit there. If I select all three, right click, go to distribute, horizontal, it'll put them all equally spaced across. If I then right click and put in a button, move that to the center. And if we go down on the properties on the right hand side, the button is selected. Down here you see button. If we make it a circle, and rather than momentary, turn it to toggle release. That means it will stay pressed when I press it. If it's on momentary, it will only be operative when it is, whilst it is pressed, not afterwards. Okay, so if we look at this, you can see that we have 3 faders and a button, but we don't know what they do. So I shall right click in the space, press label, one there. If I copy and paste 1, paste 2, and paste 3, I can then drag these across under what they are labeling. And if we select the first label, again over on the right, ignore document, ignore control, go down to values and text. And in there, on the first one, you can put in the first one, which is length. Just name it there. If we select the second label, and give it the name dry. And the third label, give it the name wet. And the fourth one we can call on stroke off. If we now look at it, that is pretty much a complete button, a complete control for the delay. Okay, if I now right click in an empty area of the screen, I can exit the container, and that takes me back to the control. If I go to the try out button, we have that there. If I go to fuzz face, there's nothing at the moment. That's all looking good. Now, if I click on fuzz face, right click in the blank area, edit the container. If we make this one a little more complex, okay, if we use radial controls for this, because the fuzz face, make it look a bit more like what it actually looks like. So I can copy that, paste 1, paste 2, paste 3, and paste 4. I can drag these across. If I select those 3, right click, distribute, horizontal, I've got an extra one. Delete one of those. I copied it too many times. Arrange, distribute, horizontal. No, that's not worked. Right click, distribute, horizontal. There we go. And then just drag that one under there. So those are the 4 knobs, and if we then put in a button, put that down here as well, go down, if we change the colour of our button to something vaguely silverish, should we make this one a hexagon, and again toggle release, make that a little larger. Maybe that's slightly over the top. Okay. Now, if we go to labels, we have a label for each of these. Copy and paste 1, paste 2, paste 3, paste 4. I went a little early on that one. If you can see on here, if you go to the colour and change the A to a 0, it makes the background clear. If I do that on all of them, I should have done it before I pasted it really, but I forgot. And that means that for the on-off, we can put that in the middle of the button. Okay, if we now name our switches, the first is volume, the second is fuzz, the third is drive, which has an E on the end. The fourth is input, and the one on the button is again on stroke off. One last thing we need to do, if we're using a pager, if you have different controls on different screens, you may find that something on the second screen overrides a control on the first screen. It's kind of annoying. They double up their controls. In order to prevent this, if we go down to MIDI, and for each one of our controls, change it from channel 1 to channel 2. I don't know why it happens. I assume it's because it's looking at it as a different page. But if we do it for all of these, it will make things easier in the end. If I now, let's think, we can put in a box. Throw that over the top, arrange it to the back, and we then find that we have a box more or less the same colour, missed that one, as our pedal in the board. Does it work? Well, if we put that on, press the play, we could probably change that colour a bit. So rather than being that colour, go down there towards the dark blue. If we copy that colour there and make it the same for all the others, It'll just make things a bit more visible. This, of course, is something I could have done before I copied and pasted the buttons, but I forgot. Clicking in the unused area of the screen, exit container, and then if we go into the show, we have something like a fuzz pedal there and a very basic delay there. What is left to do is to map it across to the Dwarf. So if you make that half screen, bring up the Dwarf GUI. If I press on the settings button of the delay, we need MIDI, save, and when you do a save MIDI and press a button, it will come up and tell you where it's mapped the controller to. And you can see that if you press the button now, it works the switch. If we do the same with the length, and dry, these are all set to MIDI already because it's not the first time I've tried to do it. So those three are all mapped. If we close that and open up the distortion, I shall undo these to show the process from the beginning. Okay, so on, off, MIDI, save, button. Oops, I'm on the wrong screen. Move across to the fuzz face. If you do something wrong, you just click on MIDI, click on save, and do it again. And that works. Okay. Drive. Say MIDI, save. Fuzz, MIDI, save. Moving it on the other side. Input, MIDI, save. And each time it tells you what it's mapped it to, which channel and which control. Volume, MIDI, save. So both panels are now set up. If we close that, click on tap reflector, you can see the control moving on the pedal as we set it, and that turns the pedal off and on. And the same with the fuzz face. We have the volume, we have the fuzz, we have the drive, and we have the input, and we have an off on. I think that doesn't quite stand out enough when it's selected. So if we come out of that, put it back to full screen, edit the container, select that text, and it's white. If we make it green, exit container, back to control. When we press that, we can now see it. And that basically is it. I hope you haven't found this video too confusing or boring. And I may be back with another one at some point. Thank you and goodbye.